Hello and welcome to Audio Notes. I'm Elad Cohen. These will be audio notes on the endocrine system for first year students in the paramedical sector. So I'm a physiotherapy student. If you're an OT, psych, or sports physiology student, this probably will be useful to you as a study aid. If you're a medical student, this might be useful to you also. You might find it a little bit lacking in detail. This is by no means a definitive take on the endocrine system, and I hope you all use it, and I am getting enjoyment just from making this as a study aid, and I think everybody should do it. If you want to upload your own audio notes to either your channel or mine, let me know. I will give you pointers on how to do it. It's really simple. Yeah, enjoy. Let's start with a little bit of the overview of the endocrine system and the necessary concepts which you're going to need in order to understand it. The first is that the endocrine system is not really one system. It's sort of a lot of systems. But in any case, endocrine means that there is signaling inside the body. This is done via hormones. Hormones are compounds which are used to signal. There are other actioning systems. So you have the paracrine system, the autocrine system, the intracrine systems of signaling. These are not systems in of themselves. You wouldn't say the paracrine system because paracrine is cell-to-cell signaling. It's local. Autocrine is when a cell signals itself, essentially. It signals to a receptor on the same cell, so it releases a hormone that affects that cell. And intracrine is inside of the cell itself. Steroids are, this doesn't really mean that the cell is signaling itself. It means that the signal travels into the cell as opposed to acting on a receptor on the cell membrane. Steroids are usually the ones that work in this respect. We have another concept which you need to understand the endocrine system, which is the idea of a local hormone. And a local hormone is a hormone that acts in any manner other than endocrine. So the intracrine, the autocrine, or the paracrine hormones can all be considered local hormones. Exocrine is when the body signals outside of itself, or when an organism signals outside of itself. So we've got hormones, those are signaling molecules, and we have all these different mechanisms of action, sort of. You have, endocrines, endo, inside the body, paracrine, cell to cell, autocrine, same cell, intracrine, inside the cell, and local hormones, which is a catch-all term for paracrine, autocrine, and intracrine. There's another concept which you need to understand the endocrine system, which is the idea of upregulating and downregulating. This means sensitization to a particular drug, hormone, or transmitter, some stimulus. Okay. You also can have rebound effects that are described under these. So let's say you take a drug for a long time and it causes a particular receptor to become very sensitive to a stimulus, or the opposite. So an antagonist can cause upregulation after you take it away. For those of you who are not familiar with the terms antagonist and agonist, an agonist causes a particular receptor to fire, to initiate, and an antagonist stops it. Okay, so let's go over some of the sort of other concepts which you're going to need here. Let's go over the major endocrine glands. A gland is just tissue that secretes something. So you have a lot of these throughout the body, but we're going to go over the big ones now. So the first one I want to talk about, because these are in no particular order, is the pineal gland. The pineal gland is also known as the pineal body, the conarium, or the epiphyses cerebri. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It looks sort of like a pine cone, and it sits superior to the pons in the cerebellum near the center of the brain. Feel free to look at Netter's or any other atlas to get a sense of where that is. The pineal gland, it makes melatonin from serotonin. Melatonin and serotonin both are hormones. Melatonin it has to do with sleep. We will get back to that later. And the pineal gland has sort of vestigial photoreceptors. And this is where you get this thing about the third eye. It's very popular in sort of esoteric circles and New Age movements and all that other stuff. People talk about decalcifying their pineal gland. It is true that calcification of the pineal gland has association with certain health problems. Alzheimer's, dementia, and cluster headaches as examples. The pineal gland, by the way, is an unpaired structure, meaning you only have one. A lot of the brain is sort of, you think of the brain as two halves, divided in half by the corpus callosum, but actually the pineal gland is one and it sits more or less in the middle. What else can we say about this? Yeah, it's about the size of a grain of rice in human beings, but it is important. So there's that one. We have the testes in males. The testes, or testicles, is the male gonad. Gonad meaning these are the cells that produce gametes. Gametes being the cells that an organism uses to transfer its genes. So the testes in males are both reproductive and endocrine, meaning that they act on the hormone systems and they also create gametes. They make androgens. Androgens are male characteristic hormones. Women also have these. Men have more of them. And they produce sperm. We have the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is in the neck, and the thyroid gland consists of two lobes connected by an isthmus. An isthmus is a term in anatomy meaning a narrow sort of band of tissue. You can think about this when you have it's also used in geography. If you have two islands with a narrow strip connecting them, that's the isthmus. It can also be water, meaning a very small sort of thin body of water connecting two larger bodies of water. So the thyroid sits right under the Adam's apple, and it is connected by the isthmus, and the thyroid gland secretes thyroid hormones. Okay, remember we said hormones are signaling molecules, and these hormones have the effect of changing the metabolic rate and the protein synthesis rate of the body, and they're also important for development. So there are two thyroid hormones which my professor wants me to know. There's T3 and T4. These are synthesized from iodine and tyrosine. These are, nutrients which you can get from things like seaweed or fish, for those of you who eat fish. But seaweed is the richest dietary source that you can definitely get your hands on. It is supposed to be present in a lot of things. Yeah, so we talked about T3 and T4. The thyroid also produces calcitonin. Calcitonin plays a role in calcium homeostasis, meaning it keeps the amount of calcium in the bloodstream at a particular level. And it does this by activating the osteoclasts. Those are the cells that break up bone. And thyroid's hormonal output is regulated by thyroid stimulating hormone, which is secreted by the pituitary gland. Okay? Specifically the anterior pituitary, which is itself regulated by thyrotropin releasing hormone, or TRH, which is produced by the hypothalamus. This is a pattern which you're going to see a lot in the endocrine system, that the hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which then signals a particular organ. This gets back to the idea of sort of a cascade effect in the body, and this is why you have enzyme chains. It's so that one signal can actually cause a lot further down the line. There is a variant in the thyroid structure, which our professor wants us to know, called the pyramidal lobe. The pyramidal lobe is not always present. It's sort of this tiny little webbed-shaped piece of tissue at the top of the thyroid. Doesn't really have much of an effect that I could find in the literature, but that's what it is. And what else we got? Let's see. Let's go into those hormones in a little more detail. We talked about thyroid stimulating hormone. T3's name is triiodothyronine. Okay, and from its name you can pick up that it's a 3-iodine molecule, and you have thyroxine, that's T4. What these both serve to do more or less is increase your metabolism and protein synthesis. They also produce heat. Your body literally makes more heat when you have this. This is why people who have overactive thyroids always complain about being hot. And yeah, if you don't have iodine, you can't make these two. So we have on top of the thyroid in the back, you've got the parathyroid. There are usually 4 of these. Sometimes you have 3. And I think sometimes you can have 5. But anyway, these make PTH, which is parathyroid hormone, which is for calcium regulation. It stimulates osteoblast activity. So remember we said that the thyroid stimulates osteoclast activity. The parathyroid stimulates osteoblast activity. And what this does is it raises blood calcium levels. Okay? And yeah. That's about it. PTH also regulates phospho. Oh, I apologize. Parathyroid stimulates osteoclast activity. That was my mistake. Yeah, if you have an overactive parathyroid, it can actually cause breakdown of the bone to happen quick. This can result in bone pain, bone mass loss, bone density loss, sort of similar to osteoporosis. We've got the endocrine system, major endocrine glands. We have the adrenals. The adrenals, also called the suprarenal glands, are right above the kidneys, and each gland has an outer cortex which produces steroid hormones. Steroid hormones are lipid hormones. Okay, these are the fat soluble ones, and the medulla, which is sort of the inner part of the adrenal. Remember, cortex in the brain is also on the outside. So the adrenals make adrenaline, which I think everybody's familiar with. Adrenaline is that stress hormone, so stimulating for the fight or flight mechanism, though it has a lot of other jobs inside the body. You've got aldosterone and cortisol, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail later on about those. And steroids made in the cortex of the adrenal gland are called corticosteroids. You have probably heard this before. If you've ever been to a doctor's office for like knee pain, then you might have been prescribed a corticosteroid shot. This happens to runners. Corticosteroids are not all cortisol. Everybody makes that mistake. Anyway, so these types of steroids influence all kinds of processes. You've got sort of the immune and stress response ones. You've got inflammation regulation, carbohydrate metabolism, protein catabolism, and blood electrolyte levels, and also behavior. These things have something to do with anxiety. I mean, those of you who are in the more, again, sort of yoga esoteric community might have heard of, quote, adrenal fatigue. I don't know if this is really supported by science. As far as I understand, it's not. But it's the idea that your adrenals are overtaxed and stop working correctly. Though, honestly, it sounds more like you're just burnt out. So let's get into a little bit of detail in terms of those corticosteroids. You have two kinds which I need to know. I'm sure that there are others, but there are two kinds that I need to know according to my professor. And these are the mineralocorticoids and the glucocorticoids. So first let's start with the glucocorticoids. These are also called glucosteroids. That's the name that I had heard before. And these bind to glucocorticoid receptors that are present in nearly every cell in the body. They're also called GR receptors, GR, just glucocorticoid receptors. And these affect glucose metabolism. They're part of the feedback system in the immune system that reduces inflammation and are useful to treat they're used actually medically to treat all kinds of overactivities of the immune system like allergies, asthma, and different autoimmune conditions. Cortisol is an example of a glucocorticoid, and they fall into two separate categories under GR, under the glucocorticoid, steroid hormones. You've got immunological and metabolic. So the metabolic ones primarily affect metabolism. The immunological ones primarily affect the immune system. You have mineralocorticoids, and these affect the salt and water balance of the body. The primary one is aldosterone, which I'm going to go into more detail about later, but basically all you need to know is that aldosterone is produced, and it regulates how much sodium you take in, and as a result how much water you keep, and we're going to get to that. There is a medical condition actually associated with aldosterone called hyperaldosteronism, which is too much aldosterone is produced by the adrenals, and what this does is it lowers potassium levels, increases hydrogen ion excretion, so you end up with the body getting overly you lose potassium, you become depleted, and this can be asymptomatic or result in fatigue, headache, hypertension, hypokalemia. Hypokalemia is lack of potassium. Hypernatremia, okay, remember I said that aldosterone regulates how much sodium you take in, so hypernatremia is too much sodium. Hypomagnesemia, which is too little magnesium. You can have temporary paralysis, muscle spasm and weakness, numbness, tingling, polyuria, which is too much urine, literally going to the bathroom all the time, and polydipsia, which is excessive thirst because you've been losing water. Tingling or metabolic alkalosis, which is high pH in the blood consistently. You may have heard people talking about alkalizing food. That's not what we're talking about here. This is much more than is necessary. So just remember that aldosterone helps you take in more sodium by keeping your kidney from releasing it. Okay, I would go into more detail with that if I was studying the urinary system, but today we're focusing on the endocrine system. So we said we were going to talk about cortisol. Cortisol is known as the stress hormone, and when it's used as a medication, it's hydroxycortisol. Okay, so if you see the hydroxy or hydro procedure for that, then you know you're talking about a synthetic version. It's the medical version. It's not endogenous. Okay, endogenous meaning produced in the body. And cortisol is produced in the adrenal cortex and is released in response to stress, low blood sugar, and it initiates gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is the formation of new glucose from fat and or protein. In healthy people, it's more from fat than from protein. You don't want to be using protein as an energy source. Protein is your building block. You do not use it as an energy source. Cortisol also suppresses activity of the immune system, and it aids in catabolism. Catabolism, remember, is breakdown, and it decreases bone formation. Okay, so slows down the activity of osteoblasts in this case. Prolonged cortisol elevation results in muscle breakdown. Short bursts of it are totally normal and completely healthy. When you talk about somebody really experiencing this, what you call the fear effect in the army, where they start to lose weight really fast and stuff like that, that's from really prolonged cortisol exposure. It doesn't happen normally. In short-term fasting, cortisol acts as an anti-inflammatory. In late fasting state, this aids the liver to take up more glucose not being used by peripheral tissue. This is one of the symptoms your body uses to sort of guard itself. And cortisol also acts as a diuretic. This is probably why when you get nervous you tend to need to use the bathroom. Cortisol is proposed to be part of the mechanism for flashbulb memory. Flashbulb memory is these sort of sharp memories you have of particularly stressful events. Works with epinephrine, and long-term exposure to cortisol damages the hippocampus and interferes with learning, hippocampus being a center in your brain. So related to cortisol, I'm going to get into Cushing syndrome and Cushing disease and what is the difference between these two things, what this is. Cushing syndrome is also called hypercortisolism, and the symptom. It's sort of a collection of symptoms. So you've got high blood pressure, abdominal obesity with thin arms and legs, red stretch marks, red round face, a fatty lump between the shoulders, weak muscles and bones, acne, and fragile skin that does not heal well. Women might end up with more hair, and they might either lose their period or get changes in menstrual cycle. You also sometimes see changes in mood, headaches, chronic fatigue. These are all symptoms that fall under Cushing syndrome. And this usually is due to a pituitary adenoma. So that is basically medical speak for tumors. These can be benign, more aggressive, or even cancerous, that are hanging out on the pituitary gland. Remember, we said the pituitary gland is one of the major endocrine glands. I will get to it later. But it's part of your brain, and it controls a bunch of different mechanisms and is influenced primarily by the hypothalamus. The other common cause for Cushing syndrome is when when you have a prolonged exposure to medications like prednisone. Prednisone mimics cortisol. Okay. By the way, when Cushing syndrome is caused by a cancerous tumor, it is called Cushing's disease. So remember, the syndrome is a collection of symptoms, and it's a disease only if it happens to cancer. If it's from drugs, then it's just, a side effect, in quotes. This affects about 2.5 people per million per year, so not everybody at all. And generally speaking, happens to people between 20 and 50 years of age. Women are 3 times more likely than men to experience it. Okay? Now, not to confuse cortisol with cortisone. Cortisone is also released by the adrenals in response to stress. It also suppresses the immune system and reduces local inflammation. It can be administered as a medication, and it is used as an immune-suppressing drug. These are not the same. They have similar mechanisms. The endocrine system is really complicated. And seeing as I'm not an endocrinologist, I'm sure that I cannot explain all of these things in sufficient detail and know all the little, steps and mechanisms. But basically, just understand that cortisone and cortisol are 2 different things. Side effects from cortisone use, because it is used as a medication. Hyperglycemia, so high blood sugars. Insulin resistance. Diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is just diabetes, basically, and we're gonna talk about that again later. It's the diabetes you typically think of. Type 1 and type 2 are both diabetes mellitus. Okay. Osteoporosis, anxiety, depression, unexpected loss of period, or amenorrhea, cataracts. Cushing syndrome can happen from too much cortisone because they have similar actions, and glaucoma. So you don't want to take too much of this stuff. You also can have pain, pigment changes, loss of fatty tissue, and tendon rupture. These are all side effects from overuse of cortisone. So we have the ovaries next. Ovaries are the gonads in females, and the ovaries, they are homologous to the testes, meaning that they serve the same function. Ovaries are where the eggs are. You think about the follicles. Follicles are the sort of fertilized eggs in females. The ovaries also are responsible for a lot of the estrogen production in the body for females, a certain amount of testosterone, and yeah, that's about it in terms of that, because we're not doing reproductive system today. Let's get to the pituitary. Pituitary, also called the hypophysis, is around the size of a pea, and this is in your brain, has its own little slot in the skull, and we'll talk about that in a second. The pituitary secretes hormones responsible for growth, blood pressure, some of the functions of sex organs, thyroid activity, metabolism, some aspects of pregnancy, childbirth, nursing, water and salt concentration of the kidneys, temperature regulation, and pain relief. That slot is called the fossa of the sphenoid bone. It's in the skull. It's the sella turcica. Okay, so it has its own little spot inside the brain. Pituitary is really important. If it gets damaged, all kinds of problems can happen. And yeah, it's divided up into the anterior and posterior halves. Okay, so the anterior pituitary, which is also called the adenohypophysis or pars anterior, is the glandular anterior lobe that, together with the posterior lobe, makes up the entire pituitary. The anterior pituitary regulates more of the physiological changes. So it does a lot of the sort of work, quote unquote. It can be affected by things other than the hypothalamus. And I'm going to get into the posterior pituitary in a second. The posterior pituitary is kind of the communication center between the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. There are things that can affect it that are not the hypothalamus. So you've got GABA, which some athletes may have heard of taking as a performance, little performance booster. GABA can stimulate or inhibit the secretion of a luteinizing hormone and growth hormone from the pituitary. Can also stimulate the secretion of thyroid-stimulating hormone. Prostaglandins are known to inhibit adenocorticotropic hormone, which is ACTH. We will talk about that also. And to stimulate TSH, GH, and LH release. And GABA with the hippocampus has been shown experimentally to influence the levels of growth hormone secretion. So yeah, and the anterior pituitary has to do also with like thermal homeostasis, so keeping your body temperature in check. And we said gonadal functions already, so I'm not going to get into that. The posterior, okay, also called the neurohypophysis, is the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland, and it's not as glandular. It doesn't make as much hormones as the anterior side. It is largely a collection of axonal projections from the hypothalamus. So there is literally sort of a special phone line, as it were, between the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary gland. And yeah, it also serves as it does serve as a site for secretion of what's called neurohypophysial hormones, so oxytocin and vasopressin, which those go directly into the blood. And yeah, the hypothalamic neurophysial system is composed of the hypothalamus, specifically the paraventricular nucleus and the supraoptic nucleus, the posterior pituitary, and these axonal projections. So you can think of the posterior as kind of the foyer from which messages from the hypothalamus reach the pituitary. It serves some function. Most of the work is done by the anterior part. We have the pancreas. Everybody's heard of the pancreas if they've heard of diabetes. The pancreas is located behind the stomach, so deep to the stomach, and it makes insulin and glucagon, it makes somatostatin, and it makes pancreatic polypeptide. Okay, so there's a number of things here. The pancreatic juice, and that is what it's called, assists in digestion of nutrients in the small intestine, and it helps keep blood sugar in an optimal range. And in terms of the percentage breakdown, which my prof wants me to know, you have alpha, beta, delta, and F cells in the pancreas. The alpha cells make up about 20% of the population of the pancreas, and those make glucagon. Glucagon releases sugar into the bloodstream from glycogen. You use this when you exercise, for example. Okay, you've got beta cells. Those make up about 70% of the population of the pancreas. Those make insulin. Okay, and delta cells, which is about 5%, which makes somatostatin, and that inhibits the alpha and beta cells. And you've got your F cells, which those make pancreatic polypeptide, which is a self-regulation hormone of the pancreas. So you've got the alpha and beta cells are your main workers, and then somatostatin and the F cell, the somatostatin producing cells, the D cells, and the delta cells, and the F cells sort of regulate the activity inside the pancreas. There is a term called the islets of Langerhans. These are the regions of the pancreas that actually contain the endocrine cells. Everything else is sort of a supporting structure around it. In type 1 diabetics, the beta cells get attacked. It's an autoimmune reaction. The immune system attacks the beta cells. And yeah, that's why diabetics are called, type 1 diabetics used to be called, they're called insulin dependent. They need insulin. So, again, we've got the pineal, the testes, the ovaries, the thyroid, and the parathyroid. We've got the adrenals, and the pituitary, the pancreas, and the hypothalamus. So that covers our glands. That covers the major endocrine glands. Close that up. Roll over here to the brain structures that I want to get into. So we were talking about the pituitary and the hypothalamus. Let's get into a little bit of detail about the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is called hypothalamus because it's right under the thalamus in the brain. Thalamus is another brain structure. You can sort of imagine where it is if you draw a straight line from behind the bridge of your nose until roughly the middle of the brain. And it is deep to the cortex and superior to the pituitary. And it's about the size of an almond in humans. You can, again, look at Netter's or any other atlas to find where the hypothalamus is. The hypothalamus is technically a gland because it does release a few hormones, but mainly it works by using control of the pituitary. And the hypothalamus is responsible for certain metabolic processes in the body, a lot of things in the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is the unconsciously controlled, though that concept also is getting turned on its head recently with guys like Wim Hof and a lot of other people being able to rigorously demonstrate control of certain features of the autonomic nervous system. And it does make neurohormones, so that means, yeah, I was right, it is a gland, that affect secretion of pituitary hormones. Okay, so you've got hormones, which then signal to make more hormones. There's a lot of that going on in the endocrine system. The hypothalamus is responsible for a lot of your basic drives, so hunger, controls body temperature, thirst, certain aspects of attachment behavior, so interactions between you and people you're close to, fatigue, sleep, and your circadian rhythm. So the hypothalamus is kind of your, you could call it your biological clock, your internal biological clock. And remember we said there's that special phone line between the hypothalamus and the pituitary, those axonal projections. There's also a blood vessel system which works from the hypothalamus directly to the pituitary, called the hypophyseal portal system. In general anatomy, a portal system is any kind of direct connection from one organ to another, rather than going back to the heart or something like that. So there is a blood supply straight from the hypothalamus to the pituitary. This is to allow for quick communication between the glands. The capillaries in the hypophyseal portal system are fenestrated, which means porous. They have little holes, and this allows for really fast exchange of molecules, but only a small amount of hormones is needed to stimulate the effect in the target organs of the body. So it's you can think of the hypophyseal portal system as kind of like this priority shipping line, and then those axonal projections are like a priority communication line between the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Yeah, so that pretty much covers brain structures, and I think we can start getting into some of the organs, and then we'll do specialized compounds and specific hormones and symptomologies that I need to know. So let's see, in terms of specialized organs, you have the thymus. The thymus is a lymphoid organ, and it hangs out, it's right on top of the lungs, basically. It's right in the middle of the lungs. You can look up where that is. T cells mature here. So when you have an HIV infection, HIV actually infects the T cells. The T cells then go to the thymus and repopulate. HIV can spread from there, and this is how the entire immune system can be infected. Basically, T cells are specialized cells that attack specific pathogens. These are not sort of your general hunter-killers that run around just killing everything. They kill specific things. Thymolin is a zinc nonapeptide, which is involved in T cell differentiation and enhancement of T cell action, and also NK, which is something killer. I forgot what the N stands for. Cell action. I'm going to have to look that up. So that's your thymus. Let's get into compounds. Yeah, let's get into compounds. So now that we have sort of a grip on where the glands are at and all that other stuff, we can get into some specific compounds and hormones that are important. So we have prolactin. I'll start at the top here, yeah. Prolactin. Prolactin is the hormone, from its name you can hear it, lactate, right? That is basically, it's responsible for enabling mammals, generally females, there are some exceptions, but in humans it's just females, to produce milk. It also influences some 300 or so other processes. A lot of hormones function is not 100% clear, but we know that it influences milk production, enabling the mammary glands to produce milk. It also, and it is secreted from the pituitary gland in response to eating, sex, estrogen treatment or just the presence of estrogen, ovulation, and nursing. And it is secreted sort of in pulses between these events. So it's not secreted all the time, but, you know, intermittently. And it also plays a role in metabolism, regulation of the immune system, and pancreatic development in children. Fun fact, prolactin levels rise after seizure, specifically from epileptic seizure, and this is used as a marker to distinguish between epileptic seizures and what are called psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. So if somebody basically just has a massive panic attack and seizes out, you can distinguish between that and genuine epilepsy from the amount of prolactin in their blood. There are two conditions associated with it. You've got hyperprolactinemia and hypoprolactinemia. So too much prolactin or not enough serum prolactin. Hyperprolactinemia is associated with hypoestrogenism. So too little estrogen, you'll get too much prolactin. And it can result in infertility in females. Oligomenorrhea, which is random lapses in period, complete loss of period. It can also result in random lactation, loss of libido in women, erectile dysfunction, and loss of libido in men. And hypolactinemia is a serum prolactin deficiency. It can cause, again, ovarian dysfunction in women. It can cause erectile dysfunction. It can cause premature ejaculation, oligozoospermia, so a low sperm count, athanasospermia, which is badly swimming sperm, hypofunction of the seminal vessels, and hypoandrogenism, so low testosterone in men. There was a study where normal sperm characteristics were restored when prolactin was brought back up, which pretty much, more or less confirms the hypothesis that you do need a certain amount of prolactin. Men do produce it. You need a certain amount of prolactin. Too much or too little, like almost anything else in the body, will result in serious problems. And it can result from hypopituitarism, so too little action on the part of the pituitary, and there are a number of reasons for that. It can result from too much of a dopaminergic action in the tubular-fundeural pathway, ingestion of D2 receptor agonists. So if you have something which is blocking the action of vitamin D, then you can get hypoprolactinemia. Get some sunlight, people. And yeah, next we have follicle stimulating hormone, which is a gonadotropin, meaning it activates the gonads. This is a glycoprotein polypeptide. Okay, so remember that's a protein with a sugar on the end. Polypeptide meaning it's a long chain of amino acids. And follicle stimulating hormone is synthesized by the gonadotropic cells of the anterior pituitary gland. That little pea-sized thing in your brain. It's really important. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone is FSH, and it regulates the development, growth, and pubertal maturation and reproductive processes of the body. FSH and luteinizing hormone work together in the reproductive system, stimulates the production of the gamete-producing cells. These are germ cells. In females, it will cause the growth of follicles, and in males, it will lead to the production of sperm. Sometimes, follicle stimulating hormone is used as a treatment for infertility. And other hormones control its release. Quick bit about luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone will cause ovulation in females or the production of testosterone in males. So you can really think of luteinizing hormone as kind of this just general surge for both male and female sexual characteristics. Luteinizing hormone in females, its surge of it triggers ovulation, we said that, and development of the corpus luteum, that is a temporary endocrine structure in females that promotes relatively high levels of progesterone. Progesterone, in turn, promotes uterine lining. In males, LH stimulates the Leydig cells. Leydig cells make testosterone, and we already said that it works with follicle stimulating hormone. Next hormone I want to talk about is adrenocorticotropic hormone. It's called ACTH, okay, which also called corticotropin. I'm going to call it ACTH because I don't feel like saying that all the time. It is a polypeptide tropic hormone. Okay, so long chain of amino acids, and it is secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. It is produced in response to biological stress, along with the precursor corticotropin releasing hormone, which is from the hypothalamus. Remember the hypothalamus, pituitary, that relationship. So ACTH is basically produced from stress, and it results in more cortisol production from the adrenal glands, It affects circadian rhythm. It's used as a diagnostic agent in assessing adrenal function. And yeah, deficiency of it is a sign of adrenal insufficiency. So if your adrenals are not working correctly, you will not have enough ACTH. What else? Yeah, too much ACTH is a result, can also happen as a result of the adrenal glands producing too much cortisol. So get your head around that one. You have melanocyte stimulating hormone. Melanocyte stimulating hormone basically tells your body to make melanin. It's made by the intermediate lobe of the pituitary. It's made in the middle of the pituitary as opposed to in one half or the other. Normally the pituitary is only referred to in terms of interior and posterior, but the intermediate part is also important. And yeah, it causes darker skins in humans, and it also increases during pregnancy. So along with increased estrogen, it can cause pigmentation changes in pregnant women. We mentioned melatonin, the pineal gland. That is, it's also an antioxidant. So melatonin has an important effect as an antioxidant. This is why you have to sleep. It's one of the reasons you must sleep. You produce melatonin. Melatonin, antioxidant, helps repair damage in the body. Don't not sleep. I am supposed to know about DHEA. DHEA, or dihydropianodrosterone, also known as androstenolone, also known as prosterone, is an endogenous steroid hormone. It is the most abundant circulating steroid in humans. It's made in the adrenals, in the gonads, and the brain. Function is not 100% clear, but it does serve as a metabolic intermediate in the biosynthesis of estrogen. Yeah, other sex hormones, a couple other sex hormones. It does have its own effects, though these are not 100% clear. It's just been seen in so many places in the body that researchers have concluded it definitely has its own effect. It is sometimes used in hormone replacement therapy for menopause. High doses cause, in women, anger, so roid rage, basically, trouble sleeping, growth of facial hair and body hair in women. Can stop menstruation and lower HDL. Remember, HDL is the good cholesterol, in quotes. You want that. And it also sometimes can cause acne, heart issues, liver problems, hair loss, oily skin, and blood sugar regulation problems. Do not take this stuff as a drug yet, people. We don't understand it. So just remember DHEA, very abundant circulating steroid in humans. Probably going to be a topic of further research. We've got atrial natriuretic peptide, or ANP, okay, also known as ANF, F standing for factor, so atrial natriuretic factor, or atrial natriuretic hormone. Has a bunch of different names, but basically it is a protein hormone, and it is secreted by cardio muscle cells. So this is made in the heart. It's a strong vasodilator, so it causes your blood vessels to dilate, and it has a specific effect in the kidneys, which is that it dilates the afferent glomerular arteriole. Go learn about the kidney if you need to know what that is, but basically it's the intake part of the nephron. It constricts the efferent glomerular arteriole and relaxes the mesangial cells. So the net result of this is higher pressure in the glomerular capillaries, and so higher flow, higher filter rate of sodium and water. It also increases blood through the vasa recta. Again, if you don't know what that is, that's the capillary bed that wraps around the loop of Henle. And yeah, washes more salt and urea out of the medullary interstitium, so you have less reabsorption of tubular fluid and therefore increased excretion. And it decreases sodium reabsorption in the collecting duct of the nephrons. It inhibits renin, which is another hormone which I'm going to talk about. The net effect, basically, of atrial natriuretic peptide is you get less sodium in the blood. Okay, so strong vasodilator and less sodium in the blood. Moving on down, we've got gastrin. Gastrin is a peptide hormone, so peptide hormones are short. It's not this really long chain of peptides, it's just a short one. It's made by the stomach, and it results in the secretion of hydrochloric acid, stomach acid, by the parietal cells of the stomach. aids in gastric motility. So it's basically for digestion. It is released in response to stomach distension. Okay, so when your stomach gets expanded with food, you make more gastrin. Stimulation of the vagus nerve will also do this. Proteins in the stomach, so if your stomach has sensor nerves that pick up the protein, then it will also make more gastrin. Hypercalcemia, so if there's too much calcium in your system, you'll make more gastrin. And it's inhibited by all kinds of things. It's inhibited by acid, somatostatin, remember we talked about that already, that's made by the pancreas. Glucagon, also made by the pancreas. Calcitonin, also gastric inhibitory peptide and secretin, which I will talk about now. There are 3 hormones which I need to know about that are made in the duodenum. You've got gastric inhibitory polypeptide, which reduces stomach acid when present in large amounts. Normally, it just induces insulin secretion. Its name has kind of been changed, actually. Our vocabulary sheet needs to be updated. For us, it's gastric inhibitory polypeptide. It's actually glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide. Secretin, not sure how to pronounce that one. It regulates water homeostasis, so the amount of fluid in your body, and helps regulate pH by playing around with the amount of secretion of gastric acid. You can think of this as sort of the antagonist to gastrin. It also acts on the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the kidney to play with your thirst levels and all that other stuff so that your levels of fluid retention are correct. You also have cholecystokinin, CCK, which is a peptide hormone. It's made also in the duodenum, small intestine. Duodenum is the beginning of the small intestine, for those of you who don't know, which releases digestive enzymes and bile from the pancreas and the gallbladder, respectively. It also acts as a hunger suppressant. Okay, moving on down. We've got hormones that are made by the kidney. Remember I said the endocrine system isn't really one system, though I guess you could say that it basically depends on the hypothalamus and the pituitary primarily. All these different organs are involved, so it's really complicated. You have, from the kidney, we have erythropoietin, or EPO. Anyone who's familiar with cycling knows a little bit about EPO. EPO makes red blood cells in the body. If you take large doses of exogenous EPO, you will make more red blood cells. And this can be dangerous because it ups the number of red blood cells in the plasma, but it does not change the viscosity. It means the viscosity of your blood also goes up, but it also means you can put out crazy amounts of work and cycle really, really, really hard. We have calcitrol, which is D3, the hormonally active form of vitamin D. There's vitamin D2 and vitamin D3. Calcitrol promotes dietary calcium uptake from the gastrointestinal tract. It increases renal reabsorption of calcium, so you lose less of it in your urine. And it stimulates calcium release from the bone, and it works with PTH, parathyroid hormone, in all of its little roles. It acts on specialized vitamin D receptors, and it inhibits calcitonin. Okay, so calcitonin, calcium uptake, calcitrol causes more calcium to be released into the blood. It sort of has a dual role as both an uptake and, reabsorption and excretion hormone. The basic consensus is that you need vitamin D3, and the amount which you'll get from your food, from your gastrointestinal tract, will be greater than the amount you lose from your bone. So the net is a gain. The other one from the kidneys is renin. We mentioned renin before. Renin is a really interesting agent, interesting signaling hormone, because it is made in the kidney, okay? But what it is that renin actually cleaves angiotensinogen, which is its precursor, which is made in the liver, okay, into angiotensin 1, and then angiotensin 1 gets converted by angiotensin converting enzyme from the lungs into angiotensin 2, which has an effect of constricting blood vessels, increasing antidiuretic hormone. I'll talk about that in a bit. Antidiuretic hormone just, basically keeps you from losing water. Aldosterone, okay, so we talked about that one too, and it stimulates the hypothalamus to make you thirsty. Now, again, remember this. So renin cleaves angiotensin from the liver into angiotensin 1, which then gets converted by angiotensin converting enzyme from the lungs, okay, into angiotensin 2, and then that has its net effects. It's not really clear to me why ACE is in the lungs. I think that this has to do with timing. Literally, your body just separates out these processes so that way you don't overregulate in one direction or the other. There are 3 hormones which I need to know about, which are produced by the placenta specifically. You've got human chorionic gonadotrophin, or HCG. This is made by the placenta after implantation. Though some cancers also make it, so obviously just because you've got it doesn't necessarily mean you're pregnant. But it interacts with the luteinizing hormone, the LHCG. Those are receptors for human chorionic gonadotropin. Receptors of the ovary, promotes maintenance of the corpus luteum, and allows for the corpus luteum to produce progesterone, and this allows for early pregnancy to actually happen. It also can be used clinically to induce ovulation. If you expose somebody to HCG, they will ovulate, and this is why it is sometimes collected by companies from pregnant women's urine to be used as a fertility treatment. We've got progesterone, which works with estrogen, reduces the effect of aldosterone. It's made in the second half of the menstrual cycle, and it keeps the uterine lining rich. Okay, so that keeps the blood vessels of the uterine lining alive, basically. And estrogen. We talked about estrogen being made by the ovaries. It is also made by the placenta. These are the female hormones, more present in women. They accelerate metabolism and encourage fat storage. As most of you know, women are supposed to carry more body fat. Females carry more body fat. Stimulates endometrial growth, uterine growth, vaginal lubrication, thickens the vaginal wall, maintenance of skin, increases bone formation, increases HDL, and decreases LDL. So that works with progesterone. Okay, remember that. Estrogen and progesterone are a tag team. It's like luteinizing hormone and what did we say? Luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. What else do we have? So that about covers us in terms of the various hormones that we need to know. I do want to distinguish between a few different kinds of hormones, just as a side note here. You've got lipid-soluble hormones, so this is your steroid hormones. These can pass through the cell membrane and directly into the cell, where they then typically affect DNA sequencing as promoters. Yeah, I have some more technical detail here for those of you that are interested. The receptors themselves are, quote, zinc finger proteins, so they contain zinc at the ends. These receptors include those for glucocorticoids. We talked about those. Estrogen, androgens like testosterone, thyroid hormone, T3 specifically, calcitrol, and the retinoids. Retinoids are vitamin A. They do function kind of like a hormone in the body. And the receptor proteins interact and induce the uptake and destruction of their respective hormones in order to regulate their concentration in the body. This is important because steroids are, a lot of processes are steroid dependent. What I meant by that was that basically if the hormone when it reacts with the receptor, it destroys the hormone itself. So this is to keep the hormone from just continuing to act throughout the body. Water-soluble hormones are your protein hormones. Those diffuse through water. They do not interact. They can't pass through the cell membrane. So those interact with receptors on the surface. There's another thing which is the releasing and inhibiting hormones, and that's just a sort of general term. They cause the release or inhibition of other hormones. So liberins, which are hormones that release, statins are hormones that inhibit. The hypothalamus, for example, uses thyrotropin releasing hormone, which is the TRH for short, to tell the pituitary to release more thyrotropin, which then stimulates thyroid activity. Thyrotropin is thyroid stimulating hormone. And the hypothalamus also uses somatostatin. Somatostatin to tell the pituitary gland to increase somatotropin, growth hormone, and to tell the gastrointestinal tract to inhibit various gastrointestinal hormones. If I say the word hormone one more time, my head's going to fall off. Before we move on from hormones, I need to tell you guys about ADH. ADH, also known as vasopressin, is the neuropathophysial hormone that is produced by the posterior pituitary gland. Its job is to retain water in the body and constrict blood vessels. If you drink a lot of alcohol and you suddenly feel the need to go to the bathroom, that is because ADH is being suppressed. Yeah, so not enough. If there's too much ADH, then your sodium levels start to rise. If there isn't enough, you go to the bathroom a lot. Hyponatremia is a symptom of not having enough ADH. There's also oxytocin. Oxytocin is made by the hypothalamus and is released. It's released through the posterior pituitary. Plays a role in social bonding and sexual reproduction in everybody, both sexes, and before, during, and after childbirth. Okay, so really important. It's described as a feel-good hormone, but actually also has to do with a lot of approach avoidance response in social situations. Giving people oxytocin can either cause them to become very social or very, very antisocial. So it's your in-group hormone, basically. It also is released in response to stretching of the cervix and uterus during labor and stimulation of the nipples from breastfeeding. Its physiological effects include the milk ejection reflex or letdown reflex of the nipples, uterine contraction. It's similar to vasopressin in that it can reduce the excretion of urine a little bit. So yeah, high doses can result in hyponatremia. And it also, this is the most interesting function in my opinion, prepares the fetus, their neural system for delivery. It passes to the fetal brain and induces a switch in the action of GABA, which then turns off the brain for a little bit. So the brain goes into this kind of quiet state for birth. And this is designed to reduce hypoxic damage. Hypoxic damage is damage from lack of oxygen. So oxytocin actually is really, really interesting in this respect, that it is one of the only hormones we know that can really shut down the brain for any period of time. Which, ironically enough, if you're in love and you're feeling lots of oxytocin, your brain practically shuts down, which is an easy way to remember that it does that. Its psychological effects, as we said, we talked about that in-group feeling, so it's not really that it makes you more social, it's that it makes you more group-oriented. Also influences the maternal bonding instinct in mammals, especially humans are no exception. It has been reported to reduce fear, but it affects males and females differently, meaning it makes females somewhat more wary and men somewhat less wary. It may have some kind of antidepressant effect. It's not entirely clear. And does that cover us for hormones? I think it does for this group of hormones. I'm going to put that all away. There is another group of compounds which I wanted to talk about. Oh, I forgot to mention HGH. That's secreted by the pituitary as well. Too much of it is associated with a condition called acromegaly, which is a pituitary gigantism. It's characterized by sort of large hands and feet. There was a person who actually was born with dwarfism, which is hyposecretion of the pituitary, but a tumor resulted in him gaining acromegaly throughout his life, so he finished his life as a giant. So that covers it in terms of hormones, pretty much. I think I got everything. Forgive me if I come back to hormones, but we are doing the endocrine system, so that's what we're going to be talking about a lot. We've got the biogenic amines. These are not technically hormones. They're made by life processes. They contain an amine group. So you've got things like histamine, serotonin. In humans, these are found in food sometimes and indicate a microorganism presence, so fermented foods. I think beer contains them, actually. So then there are all these neurotransmitters, which aren't technically hormones, that are the biogenic amines, and there are three we need to know about. They're called the catecholamines. Sorry, I lied. These are hormones. They are hormones. Forget it. We're always talking about hormones. So we've got norepinephrine, noradrenaline. We talked about this as being this is produced by closely packed brain cells, and it mobilizes the body. Basically, it's like your alertness hormone. Also can cause anxiety, increases heart rate and blood flow, releases glucose from glycogen stores, which happens when you exercise, and it encourages blood flow to skeletal muscle and away from the digestive tract. We've got epinephrine or adrenaline. Similar effects to norepinephrine, somewhat different. The effect of strength that people have described with adrenaline is called hysterical strength in the literature. Fun fact. And dopamine. That's the feel-good neurotransmitter. I guess it is technically a hormone, but it's a neurotransmitter first and foremost, and it has to do with the reward pathway of the body. It also reduces insulin production. And yeah, we also have a group called the eicosanoids. And specifically, I need to know about something called arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid is sort of the precursor for all of the eicosanoids. It is an eicosanoid itself, but it's a precursor for the rest of them. It sits in cell membranes, so it's cleaved from the cell membrane into the cell via phospholipidase A2. So we get arachidonic acid, and from there we can have it turn into a leukotriene via the action of a lipoxygenase. Leukotrienes, so we've got leukotriene A4, which can become either B4 or C4, and then D4. So C4 to D4, but B4 is by itself. And all of these act as bronchoconstrictors. D4 acts as a bronchoconstrictor. No, all of those act as bronchoconstrictors, and there's a drug called montelukast, which is a leukotriene receptor antagonist. This is a treatment for asthma. We also have prostaglandin H2. So remember, the arachidonic acid can then become prostaglandin H2, and this is via cyclooxygenase, or COX. You probably have heard of that before, actually, if you are a geek like me. So prostaglandin H2 is the prostaglandin precursor. Platelets can turn this into thromboxane A2, which is also called TXA2, which is a molecule that's not so great for your heart or your cardiovascular system. Alternatively, prostaglandin H2 can become prostaglandin proper. So you've got prostaglandin D2, prostaglandin E2, prostaglandin F2. All of these are good for your stomach, but they can cause pain, fever, and inflammation. And a third path is for prostaglandin H2 to become prostacyclin, PGI2, which is good for the heart. Now, why did I tell you all of this specifically? Because of NSAIDs. NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Okay, so most of the anti-inflammatory drugs are steroids. This one is not. They work by acting on the COX pathway, so they stop prostaglandin production, basically, entirely. This inhibits pain. It also lowers thromboxane, so they are good for your heart. They do cause GI upset, because remember we said that prostaglandin D2, E2, and F2 are good for your stomach. So you lose some protection for your stomach, but you gain loss of pain, and you gain good things for your heart. There are also foods that act like this, but that's a whole separate point. And that covers us from that front. Rolling right along, there is a concept called axonal transport, which I am going to talk to you guys about. Axonal transport is actually a neural cell process. So it's also called axoplasmic transport, and it refers to the movement of mitochondrial lipids, synaptic vesicles, protein, and other cell parts, other organelles, to and from a neuron cell body. Remember, a neuron's body is really long, so you've got the neuron cell body, and then you have the axon coming off it, which can be many more times longer. And the way that this stuff works is you have microtubules that run the length of the axon. They are tracks for motor proteins, specifically kinesin and dynein. Kinesin is for anterograde, meaning soma to axon tip movement, and dynein is for retrograde, meaning back towards the cell body movement. The speed also varies. And the best way to think of this is kind of like an express vehicle versus a slow train. So they actually move at the same speed between stations, but one stops and goes more often than the other, and the other just goes, let's say, from beginning to end. So the express one is your vesicular cargo, that's the vesicles holding whatever, and the slow one is cytoskeletal, meaning, you know, bigger things. Some pathogens actually exploit this. So you have once you've been infected with herpes simplex virus, if it goes lytic, it will use the anterograde process to move from the dorsal root ganglia to skin and mucosa, where it then causes the herpes, you know, sort of sores. And you also have, in terms of retrograde, you've got tetanus toxin, the herpes simplex infection itself, rabies, and polio. And the delay from infection to onset with these guys is because of the time that it takes. These are slow processes. Nerves don't repair very fast. They don't work very fast in comparison to other cells in the body. Remember, your nerves are really long. When we're talking about the measurements for speed here, these are in millimeters per hour or per day. So this is slow stuff. but that's just a concept which you should know. It's not technically, you know, directly related to endocrine. It's just sort of a general concept which I need to know, so I know it, and now you do too. Close this. Let's talk about some special symptoms from various endocrine disorders. These are general. A lot of these, most of them are not caused by particular endocrine dysfunction, but we've got anorrhea, which is non-passage of urine. This can be a symptom of kidney failure. It can also be related to hormones, and it also can be related to kidney stones. So, no peeing, anorrhea. Everybody got that? Good. Diabetes insipidus. This is characterized by excessive thirst, dilute and frequent urine. So you pee a lot and you're thirsty all the time. And there are basically two kinds that I need to know. There are more. I told you, these are just my notes. It's not exhaustive. You've got neurological diabetes insipidus, or DI, so NDI. CDI, central diabetes insipidus. NDI is nephronic. We're going to get to that in a second. Basically, that's insufficient ADH. Remember, that is antidiuretic hormone. And this can happen with alcoholism or just heavy drinking. And yeah, it can also be a result of any number of other things, frankly. You've got nephronic, which is kidney or nephron dysfunction. Do not confuse diabetes insipidus with diabetes mellitus. They're not related. Diabetes insipidus does not mean you've got sugar in your urine, which is generally one of the clear indications that you have diabetes, because your pancreas is not functioning, so there's too much sugar in your urine. It's basically generally a symptom of other conditions. It can cause dehydration, and it's usually accompanied by any number of other things, dizziness, headache, whatever. We have tachycardia. There we go. Heart rate over 100 resting, so more than 100 BPM resting. This can be caused by hyperthyroidism. Remember, we talked about overactivity of the thyroid. Your metabolism speeds up, you start losing weight really fast. Tachycardia. There you go. And we've got diabetes mellitus. This is not a course in diabetes. I'm just going to go over this real quick. When you think of diabetes, this is normally what you're talking about. You've got type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is insulin dependent and is juvenile. Generally develops in kids. And yeah, the autoimmune system runs around killing your beta cells. And type 2, which is non-insulin dependent. Some people can beat it. You can actually get over type 2 diabetes. You can get rid of it. It's not autoimmune. You can develop it anytime. There are actually other forms of diabetes mellitus, but I'm not going to get into that now. There is a term which our prof wants us to know, striae, which just means stress marks, virilism, which means masculinization, and hirsutism, which is abnormal hair growth in places you would not expect, say the palms of the hand. And no, masturbation will not do that. Okay, so striae, stretch marks, virilism is masculinization, like virile, and hirsutism is hair. We also have gynecomastia, which is breast tissue overdevelopment in biological males. There are all kinds of causes. Steroids are one of them. You will have a rebound effect with steroids, which can then result in gynecomastia. Or you can even get it while you're taking steroids, because exogenous testosterone can be converted into estrogen. Don't do steroids. Okay. So, basically, conceptually, to wrap everything up, the endocrine system is your signaling system. It's really complicated, but basically your hypothalamus and your pituitary rule everything. Yeah, I really recommend going into Netters or another atlas and looking at the location of the major endocrine glands and some of the other organs I mentioned, like the kidneys and the thymus. Other than that, bunch of hormones. Good luck studying, everybody, and I will see you next time. Alright, and that's it for the endocrine system. I hope you all like these audio notes and make use of them. I will be putting up more things like this. Please like, rate, and subscribe if you want to hear more specifically about anatomy, because that's what I'm going to be doing a lot of in the next little bit. And I will try to get these up on SoundCloud, or I will have some kind of link available for download in the description. Thank you, peace, and have fun studying. Or don't.